in a long lovemaking session, I get mega downloads. Oh my gosh. I would say 98% of lovemaking, we have a download sesh, like what we discovered, what was amazing, what was new. It's always that type of discussion. In a particular part of our society, specifically our spiritual society, there's a lot of noise around polarity that puts men and women in boxes.
Rachel Pringle.
She's a dynamic tantra teacher, somatic healer, and life coach
With over 20 years of experience in spiritual practices.
Starting her journey with yoga at age 12.
She now helps others connect with their inner energy,
Guiding them to unlock their potential and align their spirit with their body.
to live a life of purpose and confidence.
People automatically think sensuality means sexuality, and it doesn't. Sensuality is experiencing our senses.
Can you speak to how you actively and intentionally utilize sex in your partnership and sexual energy and chemistry in the creation process?
Yeah.
Rachel Pringle. Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Welcome to the Creative Path Podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in today. You flew all the way to Estonia for this.
I did.
That's how good this podcast
Absolutely.
is. On your own dime.
I just got here.
Yeah. Well, we're here. We both we're speakers at Mind Valley University here in Estonia. And I knew I just had to have you on the Creative Path before we both parted ways, because who knows when I'm going to see you again.
I know. Somewhere amazing in the
somewhere
world.
amazing.
Because we
Absolutely.
do that.
For people who are not familiar with you and your work, can you give us the log line of what it is that you do and the cliff notes, so to speak?
The cliff notes. I create and provide tantric illumination. So illuminating the self to what's happening inside and being able to recreate how we want to live from that place. So through tantric embodiment, so the body, for me, body, breath, voice are like the instrument that we create with. And so becoming aligned with that and finding resonance to create the life that we actually want to create. And then specifically, of course, with my husband, Johan, co-devotional relationship. So when you come into right relationship here, then doing that with a beloved and the co-creation and the magic that happens there.
And so I love that we get to have this conversation, because this podcast is really all about creativity and to me, life force energy expresses itself in two different ways. It expresses itself creatively and sexually. And you could argue that it's the same thing actually, but just for the sake of the conversation, it expresses creatively and sexually. Now, you being someone who's in the realm of Tantra, is there a distinction that you make between creative energy and sexual energy as well? Or is it all one energy in the tantric world as you teach it?
Yeah, I would say it comes from the same source. And you know what I find that's interesting is, like, if I'm in a really deep creative portal or if I'm teaching a retreat, my sexuality or my, sexual expression is like a little bit more dimmed because I'm channeling all this through creation. And so it does feel like it comes from the same zone. And so I'm like, if I'm you can hear if someone's like creating a project, they're not maybe as sexual, or if they're in a super sexual, they're not creating into a project. So finding that balance is like really.
This is why I never want to work with my partner again. And so you work with Johan.
Oh my God, it's so good.
And I'm curious how you navigate that. Because what I found when I was in my 10-year relationship, we created everything. We had business production company together. We led retreats together, all this stuff. And I found what you just spoke of, which was our life force energy flowed into what we were creating.
Yeah.
And then it reduced the sexual energy that was in the dynamic. Granted, I was 23 to 33, so I didn't have the awareness that I have now, so I could probably do it differently.
Yeah.
But I just personally set an intention for myself that my life partner would be someone that we might occasionally have a project together, but we won't work together for this exact reason. And I'm curious how you navigate that.
Must be, I hear this very often because so many people ask us, we must be unique because we love it. It is so it is like the source of it. And I speak to what I said before is like, it's not cross-pollinating. So like if we're working on a project, we're not going to like try to work on something and then like have sex at the same moment. It's just like, okay, we finished creating, let's close that container and let's open the container of sexuality, right? And that can happen. We're very good. We can make that happen in like seconds. But we love working together. It is so amazing and so beautiful. And in the beginning, of course, there was a navigation of how to co-weave, because I'm also a very like strong energy and I have like an elevated masculine in me. And so to find that balance was, took a moment, but once we found it, it's just fuel.
Do you have strong boundaries? So meaning
Immensely.
like, hey, absolutely no work talk, for like those type of very practical boundaries?
It's so funny. Like, we love our work so much. It is because our work is not like the normal numbers game, or we're not talking logistics. We're talking about the fabric of the universe. And we're talking about how we're connecting to ourselves, or how this person was connecting to a particular moment. And so we find it endlessly interesting. Maybe we'll have a boundary around like, let's not talk logistics, but we talk about, relating to self and other all the time. That's, I think, probably why it works so well, is because we're both deeply passionate. It feels like it's our dharma, and everything that we go through ourselves and together, we use when we work.
And so do you do you use sex magic?
Yes,
absolutely.
absolutely.
Can you speak to how you actively and intentionally utilize sex in your partnership and sexual energy and chemistry in the creation process?
Yeah, yes, absolutely, we do. The other thing that I think is important, and one of the aspects of Tantra for me, is to use all of the raw material that arises for transformation. And so it's an active part of our relationship, is like whatever's in the space is to use it to create with. And so it's created this like really like fun dynamic. Like I said before, we can be in a maybe very not super sexy moment, and we can be 5 seconds later in like deep tantric ritual, because we've trained ourselves into that. So it's really like fun and interesting to use in every way, tantrically and creatively, of like, okay, how can I set up the container? And I think that's the most important thing, is containers. It's like we're very active on calling in the divine, setting a container, praying, bowing. Like we do that constantly with everything. And so if there's a crunchy moment, we're like, okay, let's bring this into ritual and ceremony. Like, what can we find here? And then because both of us are so actively in our bodies, using the body, using the breath, using the sound to move through that, and then finding something new.
Can you break it down practically?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I would love to know. So you're having a conversation, something crunchy comes up, there's a bit of a disagreement, you feel an energy and a charge. What happens?
Well, Johan and I are like deep advocates of co-devotional communication. So we have immensely powerful communication tools that help us speak to the actual feeling versus the mental game. So it's a lot of being in the body, a lot of, we're like, wow, I need to like settle my breath, and we stay with each other, right? And if it's really, really crunchy, we're like professionals now. We'll call in divine. We'll literally put our hands up. It's part of our practice every morning of like, okay, like I'm going to ask the divine for a blessing to help me understand why this moment is presenting itself, for perhaps something deeper, and then talk about it. And then, we go into a practice or take it into lovemaking, setting the container of like, okay, let's explore this particular thing here. And then
What would be an example of how you take a crunchiness into a lovemaking session? Because that's for some people, they're going, yeah, that would be, do you just mean makeup sex? No, it's not. It's different. So can you? And
I would say even maybe more poignant to talk about is like when crunchiness appears in sex, because it happens, I think, more often than we like to admit. And really setting up the container of, both Johan and I love scheduling. We've been proponents of scheduling for our whole relationship, because we're both not going to a job. We're our own bosses. Things happen. And so we've been proponents of like putting lovemaking and intimacy on the schedule. And so we put it in blocks of like hour and a half, 2-hour sessions. And so we know that we're going in for that time. And so if something crunchy arises, we don't just eject, and we learn how to move through it, which is body, breath, sound. And so sometimes we'll talk about it, right? Sometimes we won't. It depends on the moment, but we won't stop. We'll find a way. Maybe we'll pause for a moment. We'll come into a more like yin relaxed state where we're holding each other and eye gazing and breathing. But we set the intention of continuing to let it reveal itself and transform versus just stopping it in the moment. And then before lovemaking, where, we meet eyes, we bow to each other, we call on the divine, something we've been doing for years and years. It's an active part of our ritual. Even if it's the times when we're having like a quickie, that happens, close the ceremony. So it turns into not just sex, but it turns into ceremony, and then it changes.
And so when you're in the quickie energy,
yeah,
you just like take a quick moment, calling in the divine real quick. Wait.
Yeah.
Does that like?
No, we make the pause.
Okay.
Yeah, we make the pause. Like, if we're like, the other day we had like 22 minutes, and it was just like the moment, we bow, and we have been doing this motion through pyramid breath for literally years. It just makes sense.
For people listening, she's just putting her hands up like she's like welcoming the sun.
Yeah, exactly. Welcoming energy to come through. And that moment, that sacred pause of bringing intention in, of we're stepping into this portal together. We're both present to it. We're both active, and there's an intention here. It does something different. It just changes something. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. And so do you utilize those rituals to actively create, manifest? Is it a body brainstorm session? Like, let's just go in and see what ideas we come up with. Like, how are you using that?
I would say we do that more body brainstorm when we're practicing pyramid breath together in the morning, which we do every day. That's always like amazing downloads. I would say that maybe me more than him, in a long lovemaking session, I get mega downloads. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, constantly, always. And I'm like, wow, I discovered this and this and this. We don't necessarily always go in with that intention, but after, I would say 98% of lovemaking, we have a download sesh, like what we discovered, what was amazing, what was interesting, what was new, what came forward, what we discovered. It's like, yeah, it's always that type of discussion, mm-hmm.
And so once you've had the downloads, and because you're working together, how do you structure your working relationship? Is it very typical where there's Johan as the masculine is holding structure and timing, and like what does it look like practically?
Yeah, we I would say in the more traditional masculine feminine, when it comes to work, we're not actually that. I'm incredibly organized, and I hold a like fucking solid container and structure, and I'm amazing with timing. And Johan is like, he can be a bit more, perhaps in his feminine, if that's what you want to refer to it as. Once he's given a direction, he can go until like just over and over. He's like a machine. So I'm like, I can hold the vision. I'm like, this is the direction. And I have like, tick, 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 we're doing this. And then once he has it, he just goes. Mm-hmm. That's sort of the structure that we have. And I think actually, speaking of that, in the beginning, that was a challenge for us, because I think there was a part of me that believed that he should hold that, and he doesn't. And I do effortlessly. Like I can come up with a course idea or a ritual or a program or a retreat in literally what feels to me like 30 seconds. It's just the way my brain works. I'm like, I see the structure, and then he can make it all happen. He's like the machine. I'm like the vision. He's the machine.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And so in terms of the creating something tangible in the world, mm-hmm. do you find, because you do stuff on your own as well, like you have your own retreats and he has his own retreats and everything like that. How different is the creative process for you on your own, creating something solo versus in partnership?
It's not super different, except for I just have someone now helping me create the thing. It's pretty much the same operating system for me, and except now I have a partner who's taking some of the load. But even then, so if I'm doing it on my own, like I love the creative process so much, and I have like my team who does more of the logistical things. That's been a game changer for me. I'm more of like the creative aspect of structure, but it's not super different actually. It's just like these are the things that we're doing, and I'm not afraid of being in that part of myself, and I'm very good at being like, and Johan loves that. He wants the direction. He wants he's like, if you give him a to-do list, he's like, okay, great, I'm doing it.
And so was that always the case for you? Were you that you were able to play all the different roles and then eventually hired a team? The reason why I'm asking this question and for framing is that there are a lot of people that I encounter that go, I don't want to do this part.
Yeah.
I just don't want to, I just want to be in this stage.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, as you've built what you've built, and obviously how long have you been in partnership with Johan now?
Almost 11 and a half years.
Almost 11 and a half years. So you have to like really think back. But when you were creating on your own, or when you create on your own, were you always playing all of that? Did you very early on realize you needed people to do the things you didn't want to do? How was your relationship to that?
Yeah, I was always doing all the things. Yeah, and I was, from the get-go, I've sort of always been that way. And I'm the type of person, like what you would call a self-starter. So if I didn't know how to do something, I would just learn how to do it. So it's like, oh, I don't know how to make a website. And I remember very early on, this was a game-changing moment for me, that I made an agreement with myself. I was like, I know that part of this journey is going to be uncomfortable, and I'm going to be annoyed. I'm going to probably be like frustrated or yelling at my computer or whatever it is. And I'm going to do it all the way. And I'm going to complete it, because I know that through the process of completion, I'm going to discover something. And I remember that moment, and that was a game changer. And I, through that, I'm like, oh, I know that even if this is challenging right now, I'm going to get past the challenge, and it's going to feel really good. And I'm going to build a lot of confidence through learning something new. And it wasn't until way later, I would say the last like 4 years, that I've really started to bring a team together, because, full transparency, I have a perfectionist part of me that was like, I'm just going to do it all myself because I can do it better. And then I got to a place where I was starting to feel burnt out, and, finding the right team, and I don't have a huge team, has been amazing. And it's incredible because now I get to be even more creative, because I have people that I trust to handle these things that I don't necessarily want to do.
How many people do you have?
Well, I have my social media girl who manages everything there. And then I just have my team who manages my retreats.
Got it.
So I've had certain people that, haven't been a full mix.
Yeah.
And I am like so fast. The way that I create and structure is like light speed. And so when people are slow, it's really challenging for me, because I'm just like, oh, I feel like I have to do more work, so I'm just going to do it myself.
And so how, as you've been building that and finding the right team and everything, have you found that you're building one sort of consistent, like pyramid breath, right? Building this thing, or do you find yourself pivoting from one thing and you do that, and then you're over here and you're doing that? Because for me, that's been what I've thought of until very recently. I thought of it as that shiny object syndrome. I thought it was a problem, because I had all of these people telling me, you need to pick something
I know.
and build it. Like we have so many people in our community that this is their thing.
Yeah.
Emily Fletcher's been on here. She has Ziva meditation. It's just like that thing that they can pour all of their energy and attention into. I had a call with a psychic last night, actually,
yes.
really late. I think I was mentioning it at dinner.
Yeah.
And one of the things that he said to me is, that's not your path.
Yeah.
That is not meant to be your path. There are some of us that are really great at one thing and we get lit up doing that one thing.
Yeah.
He said, you're like 30% on most things is going to be better than most people's thing. And so the curse of that is you're not here on earth to do, there's just the one. Allow yourself to do all the different things.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
so that's been a part of my conflict over the years. And I'm curious where you fall in that spectrum.
I'm the same exact way. And I would say, do you know what your human design is?
I'm a generator.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm a manifesting generator, and that's like part of my design. And no, I've always been like that. I will say that I have an umbrella. Everything that I do and I'm most passionate about is under the umbrella of what I like to call like sensual mysticism. And so it's all in that same realm. How I exist, how I perceive life, how I move through life is through like as a sensual mystic. And so it applies that way, but it moves from like, I'm writing sacred erotic poetry, and then I'm, then I'm writing this book, and then I'm producing this thing, and then I'm doing this thing. It's all in the same umbrella, but I give myself permission to do that because it stokes my creativity versus stamping it. And actually like talking about the process, that's an active part of my process. Like if I know that I need to sort of summon creativity and like, okay, I'm on a timeline or something and I want to get something done, I know that for me, I need to summon my creativity by stoking it with whatever it is, like, beauty or music. It's always my senses. And then that feeling will arise, and then I can focus it.
And how do you know that feeling? What does it feel like for you to know that the creative muse is present?
Oh man, it feels like if I could give like a sound, it's like, and it's all my energy is lit up and focused and coming through like my heart and my solar plexus and my tummy. It's like very focused, and I can almost in a way I can feel everything else like shh, and I'm hyper focused and channeling energy.
Can you create that intentionally for
Yes.
yourself every time?
If I take the necessary steps, I love that we're having this conversation because I've thought about this so much. Yeah, I would say so. It's not like down to a formula.
Yeah.
But
what are the steps? Take us through it.
There are elements like, first of all, I know that there's always a moment of resistance. And so
Always.
I always.
Yeah.
And so I expect that. And when it comes, I'm just like, oh, hey girl. Like, and I really focus on being gentle. I don't like to force myself. I will sit there similar to like, a meditation practice in the beginning. You got to get over that period of stickiness. So I know that I'm just going to sit there and I'm going to give myself space and time for it to summon. And then it's creating space. So if I have anything like little things, I must clear them, like emails or voice notes or, returns or anything that's clouding like taking real estate in my mind of I need to do this, I clear it. So if I'm like getting ready to create something, maybe the days before like spent clearing out my inbox or cleaning up my house or creating the spaciousness in my actual vicinity here and around me. And then stoking beauty. That's like the step right before. So for me, playing music or, binaural beats, that get me into a creative sense, reading poetry, looking at Pinterest. I have like so many boards, and I have like vision boards all over my Pinterest. That helps me get out of my mind and into my feeling state. And it immediately calms my nervous system. And then I usually ask myself a question of like, what is it that I want to express right now? So not what I want to say, because times it will like come into my head, or like or what is it that I'm feeling right now? And that drops me. And then I just start. And I start with the awareness that the beginning might feel clunky, and breathe. I have to like breathe, and I have to have some sort of really nice beverage. Usually that's sparkling, you know, and cold, or a tea. So it's like I set up, again, all these sensory things. I have to be comfortable wearing the right clothes in the right environment. I tend to work lying down. That's one of the ways that I like the most, or like on a couch propped up in a particular way where I'm really, really comfortable and my back is supported.
And you're on a computer, because you keep doing this as you're talking, like as you're typing on a keyboard. So when you say you're creating, what are you creating on the computer?
This is like if I'm editing, you know, like when I was editing my book, or editing, the way that I create all of my content is through, I write constantly. You know, on my phone, if I have an idea, I'll wake up in the middle of the night. If I write before I'm going to sleep, I just write constantly. Or in the morning, I'll do, you know, like I'll drink my coffee and write poetry. So all of that I then take way later and sort of edit it down, because it's, you know, it's just like, and then when I'm doing that moment, it's like, okay, I'm getting in the zone and bringing it into like flushing it out, what you would call, or same way when you're writing a book, you know, you need to like come through the editing process. So in that moment, or if I'm writing a newsletter, or if I'm, you know, writing copy for my website, or there's something that's writing related, or preparing my rituals, I'll do the same thing. The same exact process I just explained will be the same thing if I'm writing or organizing the structure of a ritual. So I'll be laying on the couch and have my phone, have my notes where I'll create the points of the arc, and I'm creating my playlists. And it's like the zone, it's the same thing of like, okay, what am I feeling? What is it that I want to experience? Getting myself into a feeling state. And then.
And what have you found to be killers of creativity? What are the things that, because you just explained what could go into creating the environment that you need, and then there's times where you may realize, wow, for the last several weeks, I have not been in that. What kills it for you?
Noise, clutter, news. I never, ever read or listen to the news. I haven't in years. And people are always like, why don't you? And it's just, it's like immediately, no. Rushing, you know, and if I haven't gotten enough sleep, and if I'm not really in my body, if I'm like not taking care of myself, those are the main things. But the main things are noise and clutter, like number ones, those tie. And it's interesting. I just heard this from Alison Armstrong, that as a woman, like when you're in a room, things like, if they're out of order, they like yell at you, which is exactly how I experience them. It's like, you know, Johan would be like, is the pillow straight now? And I'm like, it is. And, you know, when we make the bed in the morning, it's like a ritual for me, because then the bed is quiet. And when I walk into my room, there's stillness and there's silence. And then for me, you know, creativity, like when I'm making love, or when I'm meditating, you know, when I'm in stillness, when I'm just sitting out on my patio and I'm watching the trees or watching the mountains, there's stillness, there's silence, there's order, which allows something new to appear. It's like a must.
For me, I agree with clutter, but my relationship to it is different. I actually find that the space that I'm in and the shape that it's in is indicating to me my mental state.
Absolutely.
When I look around one day and I go, it is cluttered AF in here. What the hell? I actually go, wow, okay, what's going on? What's going on? Usually it's overwhelm. Usually it's stress. Usually it's too many plates that I'm spinning at once. And my outer environment is now reflecting that to me. So I'm grateful for that, although it doesn't scream at me in the same way. It's more of a like, oh, yeah, now I caught it and moment. And so when you speak about sitting in stillness, something that you and I have talked about off air, do you say off air?
Yeah,
well, we're not off air.
Yeah.
Is I can't imagine ever living in a city again. We used to live in Los Angeles at the same time, and like I can't imagine ever living in. Every time I go back to Los Angeles, I'm like, this is a cesspool. What is happening here? Just like dark energies and like crazy everything.
Yeah.
And so I love you, Los Angeles. There's a part of that I'll always love you.
I love
in the
you
same
too.
way that I love, like the people that I would never date again.
Yeah.
And so, and so my thing is stillness, silence, sitting out in the trees. I describe it as when I'm actually out in nature, and I shift into the frequency of being able to hear nature, really, that fills me with so many ideas, and my nervous system shifts and all of that. When you're in a creative mindset, and this is a very, very nuanced question, but when you're in a creative mindset and you're out and you're sitting and you're with the ocean or the trees or whatever, are you actively thinking? Are you actively going, let me think about this thing that I'm creating? Or are you actually just being in stillness and you're gifted an idea?
Yeah, I would say that I'm just witnessing. I'm just witnessing what arises. And I love the way that you express that, because I'm thinking about, if I'm laying on the beach, which I do a lot now because I live, a few minutes from there. And I'm, I've just taken a swim and I'm just looking at the sun or at the sky or the mountain or the water. And then I'm just witnessing, and things will just appear. And that's when I'm writing something down. And I do my best to not try to make anything out of it. It just, I want to just be in the receiving of, inspired moment or an idea. And I'm acutely aware of what's happening. I would say in most moments, it's just the way that I tend to work. And so I'm like, I'm always in this state of like fascination. I'm like, ooh, wow, ooh, interesting. Ooh, I just had this thought. And luckily I have a partner who really supports that. And that's like the basis of most of our conversations. We're sort of, and all of my closest girlfriends, what we would call, cosmically musing. So I was talking about ideas and with open ends. And that to me is like my favorite space to be in.
Now this is funny because I went through a series of dating relationships where I felt as though I gave that up. The cosmic, open-ended, existential, philosophical kind of musings. And I'd previously been that was what I wanted in partnership because it's so fun for me. I could literally just like masturbate to philosophical ideas about the universe, right? And so,
yes.
And so I was thinking to myself, wow, okay, maybe I don't need that from partnership. Maybe what I value in partnership is emotional support and stability and great sex life and these different things. And that I can get from friendships. I have community where I can call up someone and go, hey, I got this idea about the meaning of this sign of this thing and how it affected my childhood. And like, let's talk about that. Yeah. And I didn't necessarily need that in partnership. Now I'm on the fence. I actually don't know because I just love it so much. Yeah. But I also have such a big community of people I can do it with. How do those conversations impact what you create in the world? Or like, how does it tie into, because I know that you and Johan have them all the time, and it sounds like it's an absolute non-negotiable. So I'm just like asking for a friend about how it impacts everything else that you're doing to be in conversations like that. I think a lot of people only get those conversations by listening to podcasts. They don't necessarily have them in their day-to-day life. That's
like my whole life. I would say that's a conversation I'm having with myself all the time and with all of my closest people. That's the way that I understand myself. And so it's interesting what you brought up, because I've heard this recently that it's like sort of a thing in dating as well, and in relationships, that like you don't do that with your partner, and you kind of keep that separate, and it takes away the mystery. And I don't believe that at all. I believe that the deeper you go, the more mysterious it gets. And so it's like mystery begets mystery. It's just like the deeper you go, you're like, whoa. And it feeds me. It fuels me. I love it. Johan and I went out to dinner 2 nights ago and got into this super deep conversation, deeper stuff in his childhood. And like, those are the conversations that I live for, because I get to understand him more, and he gets to, feel me holding him more. We get to see where it correlates here more, and it takes us out of known and allows us to play more in the unknown, which is, I would say, like the basis of all my work.
And how do you maintain polarity throughout that experience?
Yeah, it's so fascinating, because that's really that's where that comes from, is that people are saying not to have these conversations with your partner because it distills polarity, and I don't experience that at all. It expands and activates our polarity, because we're getting to know each other. It's interesting. I'm witnessing a part of me that's like, I don't even know how to respond to that, because it's the complete opposite for me.
I think it would be valuable for you to dissect it.
Yeah.
Because
to share
for the rest of us muggles
yeah.
over here. No, because I think that you and Johan have what I said was just an abnormal, even relationship, in terms of your sort of open relating, just like navigation, marriage, children, but the way in which just the whole thing. I don't see many people do that well, and definitely not many people doing it as well as I see you both doing it. Granted, I'm not there behind closed doors, but like from what I observe,
it's really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. I could subscribe to your OnlyFans for that. So for that, there's ways of thinking and approaching that allow you to do that, and also, as you said, have these really be able to work together, have these really in-depth processing conversations, and not feel like you're losing polarity, but gaining polarity. And I'm curious whether or not, because I would say that is abnormal. That is not what most people experience. And so as someone who is not dissecting it in terms of like what made that possible, it makes me think, okay, maybe there's just a coding to how you both are
absolutely.
that works in that way that isn't necessarily replicable unless you have a certain type of coding. And I think that I don't want to say it's ever not possible, but like there are some people who have personality types and things more coded to monogamy or less coded, right? And so I'd be curious how much of this is nature versus nurture.
Yeah, and now that I'm hearing, I really love this question and this inquiry, because what I will say is that when I am like musing with my girlfriends, I mean, we could muse for literally hours on end. And Johan has a limit, right? And so I recognize when his limit is, and if I'm chewing on a concept, then I might take it to, one of my other girlfriends who I know will have the pleasure to go down that journey. It's like, I just went on a girls trip and people were like, what did you guys do? I'm like, we talked the entire time. We didn't whereas for guys, like you're going and doing activities, like we did our practice and we went for walks, but we basically just talked and mused. So I recognize when Johan is at his limit, and when he wants to, he is a man, and he's an alpha man, he's a man's man, guy's guy. He wants to go and do things, and I can just dwell in this space for literally ever. And so I have an acute awareness of when that moment is. Like I said 2 nights ago when we had dinner, that moment opened up, and I capitalized on it. Where it was like, I'm holding the space, asking him questions, getting a deeper insight. And that doesn't happen all the time. We're musing in different ways. But what I will say is that I think is important is I believe that we have, in a particular part of our society, specifically our spiritual society, there's a lot of noise around polarity that I don't think is really healthy for us in the dating world, that puts men and women in boxes. And Johan and I feel and have said time and time again that we're not meant to be put in boxes. And Johan, in his natural way, is in his masculine, and I am in my feminine. We put each other in that place. I also have a super active masculine. He also has a super active feminine. And we just move between the two instead of thinking he can only be masculine and I can only be feminine. Because I think that that's sort of a lot of the noise that's out there, which can be a trap, is like, I think having an awareness of when we as women, we can have a tendency to like maybe harp on something for too long.
Nag.
Yeah. Not
what
even,
you mean? Nag?
Not nag, not at the person, but we'll get in a muse and just gonna go over and over and over. And we can do that with our girlfriends, but the man eventually is gonna be like,
I need a little linearity.
Yeah.
Like
he's like,
start and finish.
Yeah,
to this.
exactly.
Yeah.
He's like, I think I'm done. And I know that in times like when we go on our morning walks, I can feel it energetically in him. He's like, okay, like I'm ready to move on. And so instead of, trying to make him, I'm just like, okay, we're moving on, right? This is your limit. And then I can take this type of conversation and inquiry to a girlfriend.
So what you just described, so there's a lot of talk about polarity from every Instagram life coach on the internet right now.
Yes.
It's a popular thing to do. And so what I find interesting is you just spoke to an example of actually understanding polarity. You understand that if you don't respect that boundary energetically that he has, which is basically in his masculine of like, I need a linear, this is now circling in on itself enough times that I just need to stop. But you feel that and you honor that, which means that you actually do understand the polarity dynamics there. Yeah. Whereas someone else goes, why won't you talk to me about this? It was like, well, we were talking about this for the last 2 hours. And that argument happens when people don't understand or feel the polarity dynamic. And so it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? Because while it is possibly putting boxes around things that feel very limiting or whatever, if you don't understand them, you almost can't dance with them. It's that idea that you actually have to get really great at the thing in order to break the rules.
Yeah, totally. I completely agree with you. Yeah.
And so how active I imagine at some point in time in your relationship, you were actively in conversation around masculine, like the polarity of your relationship and how to navigate his masculine, your feminine. Like, was that an active conversation at some point?
I wouldn't say it was active masculine, feminine. It was, because that role was always very clear between us. The active conversation was, actually it was me coming more into my feminine, and not because I was in, overtly in my masculine. I was just more cut off from my sexuality in the beginning of our relationship. I was much more in my people pleaser and in my, smallness. And Johan was like, I want more. I want your fire. I want more of you. I want to feel you more. I want, and in a way he was like, I want you to challenge me more. I want you to meet me here. So that was an active conversation for us for years and years and years. Which could be, I guess, related to masculine, feminine in a way. But I think even with, like I said, with the work stuff, we're maybe in the opposite of traditional roles, but it works. And so I think, like we have established what works, what he does well, what I do well. And we come into like the support of like, this is like, a logistical thing is like he books all of our flight tickets, like he's great at that. And he finds the best tickets at the blah, 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 blah. And I book the Airbnbs and most of the time, book our restaurants. And so it's like finding the things that we're great at and just settling into that instead of getting into the trap of like, this is your job because you are this,
Yeah. And I think that that's really beautiful. And I love that approach. And you're giving me things to chew on after, again, I dated Eastern Bloc, and there's a very specific view of what masculine and feminine roles look like and are and different things. And that threw me for a loop as someone, when I was dating American women, it was, no, we're in this together 50-50. Like, let's figure it out. And so there was just differences that I observed. And some of those I actually like, some of them I didn't like, some of them. And this is a very active conversation because ultimately I see masculine and feminine energetics as happening inside of each of us and then playing out outside of us. Yeah. And the masculine, feminine energetic, for me, that was most difficult to resolve was the inner feminine as my artist that just wanted freedom to express and write poetry and just not need to think about algorithms and whatnot. And then my inner entrepreneur, my inner masculine that said, what's the point of this? Yeah. What are we growing? What are the metrics that are telling us this is working? You know? And so that inner feminine and masculine inside myself was always in conflict. And it led to a lot of hard lessons, and then ultimately led me to start the Artistic Entrepreneur incubator program. And so I have a pathway sort of that I take people through in that program that I use as a final 5 questions that I want to ask you as we land the plane. Oh yeah. I just described an inner core conflict. And I find this upward spiral, right? The core conflict shows up at every level of our up level. Yeah. And I'm curious if you have a core conflict that has consistently shown up at every level for you.
That's a great question. The first thing that comes to mind is a part of me that thinks I need to be doing more and a bigger part of me that wants to do less.
That's a great one.
Yeah.
I think I'm right there with you right now based on our conversations. Like, why am I doing so much other things? Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And so that then leads into, once you can identify the core conflict and recognize that basically is going to be a frame of reference for everything and building what you're building and what you've created in the world. Then you go into the second phase, which is developing a 100% certainty offer. This is the thing that you have so much certainty that the right person coming into your field of orbit will be shifted because of this offer that you have or this value that you bring to the world. I find that when I started to develop that certainty, when I had that, I moved through the world differently. And I'm curious what you feel that certainty around.
Is to completely reprogram your energetic infrastructure, like the way that you see and make meaning out of things. Like that is like my specialty. I can do that endlessly.
For yourself or for others?
For both. I can do it for myself, and I love to do that. I mean, it's amazing what people, it's like, oh, I've been viewing this a completely different way. And it's for me, freedom, and ultimately provides the connection I think we're all looking for.
You and I are very similar. I was just interviewed on the Mind Valley podcast, and he was asking me about what it is that like makes me light up so much about being on stage and different things. And I said, it's actually, I love changing how people view the world.
Me too.
That moment where I'm coaching someone where they're a super smart person, very successful, all of these things, and I say something or give them a frame of reference that makes them go, yeah, I never thought of it that way. Yeah. It changes the entire way that they like move forward in the world. Is such a high for me. And that's at the core of everything that I do, my poetry, my coaching, all of it. So I'm right there with you. And so one of the things that after you have that certainty of what it is that you can really do, you need to actually start to craft content in this world, in this day of age, like something that basically says, this is me in the world. And I'm curious what you have out there that you feel like really captures your essence, or is that still a struggle?
No, I would say that it is a essential relationship to our darkness. That's what, that's my, like I've been writing the same thing over and over again for years. And if I look back at journals from like 20 years ago, it's the same thing. And so, and that's like finding our turn on through our darkness and feeling the transformation that exists there and the actual service that comes from that. Like the the aha, the awakening that comes from facing that, and not from like, I'm going to heal this and I'm going to fix myself, but from like understanding our darkness from this sensual space of like love and care and tenderness and eroticism.
How does that look when you encounter something very difficult, challenging, that's triggering or whatever? How do you shift that into a space of eroticism and sensuality that you've embraced?
Well, I think that the first, sensuality is like, people automatically think sensuality means sexuality, and it doesn't. Sensuality is experiencing our senses, right? Experiencing for me, like our aliveness, right? So it's a very physical feeling. And so usually when we encounter a trigger, it's very physical, right? It's like, right? And so feeling and exploring first, what are the thoughts that are connected? And those thoughts usually connect to another physical experience. And so using, again, body, breath, sound, I deeply believe that the act of surrender is a physical act. It's the consciousness and mind is there, but it has to also happen from the body, which is feeling that point of tension and expanding through, like beyond it, through it. And then through that feeling, it becomes a turn on. It feels good. It's like, they always say that pain and pleasure are like right there it's like a knife's edge. And I live on the knife's edge. And when you're in body work and someone is like digging into that space, and it's like, if you don't resist it, if you allow yourself to open into it and really absorb, learn, grow, see, face it, let it reveal itself to you, it very, in my experience, almost always leads you to this aha moment where you created a belief or agreed to something that wasn't really yours, or took on something that wasn't really yours. And when you see that and go to that, usually a memory or something, and release it, it is a physical feeling of euphoria. You're like, oh shit. And it's like, it releases in your body.
Mm-hmm. This is you just described the way I write poetry.
Yeah.
Starting in this place and just going so deeply into it and letting the words kind of ride the wave of my emotions.
Yes.
And then it always surprises me. I have no idea where the poem's going, because if with each line I'm peeling back a layer and I don't know what's under the next one. And so it's just deeper and deeper and deeper. And then there's that release moment. And often that's a shift in the poem itself. Yeah. There's so many poems I've written where you can see it like went in a different space in the last like 20% of it. And it's like, yeah, that was the gold from all that digging. And so, for me, that's my signature content is my poetry in so many ways, because it is the evidence of that transformational process. Yeah. And so after the signature content, I go into the module where it's about dating your audience, which to me means building real authentic relationship with your audience. And I'm curious, as someone who's on social media, how do you relate to this social media world, and have you managed to create an actual real depth and following the way that you have?
This is such a great question. And I think this is where team comes in, because I felt at a particular time this immense pressure to show up for the algorithm and to produce and to create and to monetize. And that 100% stifled my creativity and my message. And I didn't like it. And so that's when I hired my girl, Queena, who's one of the most phenomenal human beings. And we have the most amazing relationship and connection. And she gets me and gets my work. And she is my audience. And the way that we work is based off of complete trust. So I'm almost rarely writing something to post, right? Occasionally, like my Mind Valley posts, it's like in the moment, I'm like really excited. I'm sharing, yay. And that will happen. But normally when I'm writing, I'm just writing to express myself. Exactly the what you just said. It's the same sort of experience where I'm just like, I'm I'm in a tidal wave of realization through me, and I just need to get it out. And so I write like that. And I also create like that with when I shoot, it's all through actualizing a feeling or an expression or an embodiment or an archetype that I'm exploring inside of me. And then I give her all of that content and she creates it. So I eliminate this thing where I'm trying to please my audience versus giving to my audience. And I always come from that awareness now. I come from that awareness now of being in service of sharing what I'm actually feeling versus trying to create content that gets people in, because it never lands for me. And I'm like, I've noticed that the more that I do that, the more that I connect with my community. And I know and feel that I have such a loyal community. I have women who've been with me for years. Clients that come and work with me are like, I've been following you for years. And the thing that I get, which I'm so grateful to receive, is I'm consistent because I'm not trying to rope people in or produce something. I get to just like, this is what I'm feeling. Does this hit any part of you? Like, what does it bring up in you? And so it feels, Queen and I always talk about that. My content, it feels very intimate because it is. It's not overly produced. It's like my top of the morning. These are the writings I'm feeling after my dream state. And then she's amazing visionary. And of course we branded it together. It's all me, but she's just creating it. So I don't have to be in that machinery that stifles my creativity.
Mm-hmm. And so the final stage of this you've just touched on, which is how do you build a monetization ecosystem? Mm-hmm. And I generally talk about it through systems, but also people, and you working with a small team and that sort of thing, but still being monetarily actually successful in that way. So for you, how do you approach the actual building of the business?
Yeah, I love this conversation because it's so revealing. Every time that I have tried to like really, pump, I go back to the first thing that I said. Is like, I can hear the noise of like, I'm not doing enough. And then I get in this really, and I'm like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. So I have relinquished that. And I focus purely on what it is that I want to do. And I lead based off of that. So I was running courses pretty much nonstop because that's where I was. And I haven't ran a course in some time because that's not where I am right now. Right. What I am is like, I have a full client list of deep soulmate clients where we're going into the depths, and it is so fulfilling. And then my retreats and my workshops and festivals. So I get to deep one-on-one, and then I get in-person ritual, like all the way. Those are right now my two highest excitement. And so I believe that my audience can feel that. And so when I put out, I don't even advertise that I'm taking on clients. I just tell the divine I'm ready and open for someone who matches what I want to experience right now, which is an interesting thing, but it produces the most incredible thing because then the person's getting what they want, I'm getting what I want, and then we open a portal together and it's like magic is created. And same with a retreat, I'm like, I architect what it is that I want to experience and want to feel, and I call in the people that also want that. And then the money just flows. Mm-hmm. And since I've made that shift, it's been flowing, and I don't have to think, and I don't have to worry about it. And I'm sensing, the next phase of this, which, there's going to be some time, is like me training people. But even that, I don't want to train on a big scale. I want to take, a small group of women, and I want to be in person multiple times, and I want to go deep as fuck, because that's what I want. Mm-hmm. And so if I'm generating, I can even feel it in my body right now. I'm like, there's a zone that's happening because I'm so like excited, and like I can, and I know that they'll sense that, and then it'll be a magnet, and then I won't even have to like sell. I just get to serve, which is the thing I want to do the most anyways.
I love that, and very relevant to people listening and to myself. So thank you for sharing where you're at with it. For those people who are going to be right there wanting to train with you and all these things, let them know where they can find you, follow you, and get more information about what you're doing.
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram, Positive Pringle, positive energy, Pringle like the potato chip. And I am rachelpringle.com. And yeah, just connect with me, and there might not be much, but when it comes out, it will be potent.
Beautiful. Well, Rachel, thank you so much for coming on The Creative Path. And thank you to everybody who's walked this creative path with us. Is there any final words that you want to leave the audience with?
Thank you so much for having me. And I think the number one thing about creativity is true commitment to a process is freedom. And not to produce anything, but to discover who we are in the midst of that process. Yeah,
100% agree. Thank you again for being here. And for everybody who's listening to this, if you've gotten value, please, please, please take a moment just to hit that review. It makes a big difference in the algorithm, and the dreaded algorithm, I know. It really does make a difference, and it supports the show. And then share it out. Tag us, tag Rachel, tag myself. Let us know what you thought of the show. We appreciate you so much. And I want to remind you that always in all ways, you are seen, you are heard, and you are loved. Blessings, fam.
Yes.
Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate you taking the time. If you are interested in building a life that you love through the 3 pillars of relationship, business, and creativity, then I encourage you to continue checking out more of my content, including this video, which I really think that you will like.